What is it?
We just got word from your brother.
Oh, that's great. How's he doing?
Well, there's a band of scythe-tailed bird wyverns.
Oh, my.
And a fire-breathing crane.
Okay, I get the gist of it, I think.
And a hippoplatypus turtle toad that tried to swallow an Arzuros whole.
They need our help. We're going home, everyone. Ladies, gentlemen, and monsters of all ages, welcome one and all to something that may or may not be necessary, but by God, I wanted to do it anyways, just because I can. At this point, we've all seen the new monsters, studied their features, watched every moment of them existing that we are able to, or maybe that's just me and I have a problem, but it has led me to one place, a place of ranking, a place of lists. So today, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for my own personal list of the top 5 new monsters announced for Monster Hunter Rise. And to be fair, there are exactly 5 new ones, unless you're counting a remade Arzuros or Tobikadachi as new, which I am not for this exercise at the very least. So without further ado, let's begin with
Number 5.
Alright, my quiet American. How many eyes do you have?
Unnamed Temno Seren.
So first off, this thing is definitely 100% a spider, but chances seem super unlikely that it is a Nerscylla to me specifically, personally, given that it has 8 eyes. Nerscylla has 6, which means that we are quite possibly seeing a new spider monster here, and I don't think anyone would complain about new monsters of a more varied skeletal base. So I will say the main and pretty much only reason that this creature is all the way down at number 5 for me is because we just saw pretty much nothing of it. Just a super close-up of its face around the eye area. So I'm absolutely hoping to be proven wrong and have this be one of my favorite monsters, but I have to judge them up to this point on what I have seen, and unfortunately of this one we have not seen very much. In other words, Spider, I barely know her. Ha! Realistically though, if anything, it is probably a close cousin of Nerscylla, sort of like Rodobon is to Uragon, given the very clearly spidery visage and what could be web but could also have been skin hanging from it in the corner.
Number 4.
Charlie, come here, make the angry face. Angry.
Magna Malo.
Again, these may change in the future, but from what we have seen, Magna Malo is a cool looking monster, but it just sort of looks standard to me. Like if Zinogre, Odogaron, and Nargacuga got in a room together and somehow all had a baby as a group of 3. This is precisely the monster that would come out of it, and, well, it's exceedingly edgy, and there's nothing wrong with that, but for me personally, edgy monsters have a ceiling for how cool I find them, unless there is something particularly interesting tied to them as well. And at least for now, I have seen things that interest me more in these other 3 fights ahead of it. This one I expect will probably change my mind once we know more about him, at the very least jumping to the next spot over the monster that I have sitting there.
Number 3.
Calling the dancing trio!
Great Izuchi.
This one is absolutely fantastic. Based on a Sickle Weasel, this creature is the first drome monster, the first large version of a small monster who seems to truly fight with a proper pack mentality. As they told us, they tend to fight in a group of 3, and they will either all attack simultaneously or in quick succession of each other to take advantage of their larger numbers. He is super furry, yet also scaly, and this one is really cool representation of this concept. I love the individual monster himself, even just from an aesthetic and personality standpoint. The way that he looks and the way that he feels as a creature is super appealing, but then you add in the overarching fight mechanics of the pack mentality, and I have to imagine that this will be one of my favorite low tier monsters just ever. It just looks like it has just enough intrigue to draw you in without being particularly challenging, like a Great Macau, for example, who I herald as being one of the best lower tier monsters. As for the individual attacks with this one, what is particularly cool is not only do they seem to attack together as in the timing of their attacks, but also the actual animation itself. The little ones and the big one will always do the same attack as each other. Some of these seem to happen with the little ones attacking first, give you warning as what the big one is going to do, and some of them happen from the big one first, but this fight looks like it will have a nice bit of depth and actually have something to learn as far as patterns if you really spend the time with it, which is always great to see from an early game monster like this one.
Number 2.
Wings of surveillance.
Why do you do that?
Do what?
Just because you say wings of before something, it doesn't mean that you're doing a special move.
Aknosom.
And this one is just absolutely special right here. The first monster in an extremely long time who this closely resembles just a straight up bird, essentially being a crane with an exaggerated crest and an extra muscular body. The beautiful color scheme has not gone unnoticed either, and I cannot help but feel that on a certain level, this monster reminds me just a little bit of Yonkut-ku. Like if you pause it right here on this fireball animation, this thing has huge derpy potential, while also having quite the potential to be serious too, given how it can change the shape of its head frills to affect the fight, almost like it has a more offensive stance and a more defensive stance that actually blocks attacks like a shield, which is quite neat. And when it does this, its attacks also seem to have a massive amount of knockback attached to it too, which is super interesting to see played around with on a monster like this. Usually you see knockbacks like this on really large chunky monsters, not something this graceful. All in all, this one is super intriguing to me just because of how unique it is, honestly. The entirety of the shape and animation seem really unique and in a really quirky and genuinely personality-filled way. The only real downside that I see here is that it is a fire monster. Look, I know maybe I shouldn't, but I just have a bias against fire monsters. I consider them sort of boring. They're like the least elemental element at this point because 90% of monsters can use fire in some way, shape, or form. So it just lowers it down just a touch. However, this is easily a monster I can see translating to a subspecies and such with other elements. This creature just has a ton of potential as a whole, and I am super excited to see it no matter what happens.
Number 1. Tetranodon.
This Kappa-inspired monster is just, well, did you see this thing and for some reason think it wouldn't be my favorite of the new monster batch we've been given today? It sort of has to be. I mean, he's just so special. He's an amphibian, like a proper amphibian moving around like a toad and everything, but he has this sort of turtle shell on his back, leading into a face that almost looks like a hippopotamus, but most people are calling him Platypus Dodogama. I mean, there are just so many creatures shoved together here into this one amalgamation of monster, and his name is
Tetranodon.
And on top of that, they covered him in moss or grass or some sort of greenery like that, which is just a thing that I love on monsters in general. It really gives them more of a peaceful feeling to me, like Duramboros and his moss-covered back, or Yamasukami with an entire forest growing on top of him. Sure, with this creature it is used to represent that it is more of a swamp-based monster, but I still love the aesthetic of it nonetheless. The way he moves around will just entertain me forever, and his attacks seem pretty interesting too, especially when you get down to something like the turf war type situation that he has with Arzuros here, which develops into him literally attempting to swallow him whole. A fucking Arzuros, a massive bear monster, not some small monster. No, he tries to swallow an entire damn bear in one go. This amphibian has a dream to be the strongest that there ever was, and I am not even going to consider getting in his way, which is why up to this point, he is easily my number 1. Alright everyone, I've been Cotton Dinosaur, and this has been the top 5 new monsters announced for Monster Hunter Rise. Do you agree with my choices and order? Are you as excited for these monsters as I am? Like if you liked the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. This is the brand new outro to tell you all the things that you do that we love, so let's start with something simple and say, oh, we love your eyes. When they're watching us play video games, when we make a bunch of jokes that are kinda lame, or when they gaze upon our failures as we try to kill the monsters or important news about the Kingdom Animalia. Rage, Cotton, and Hollow are all here, talking about the things you want to hear, so if you want to be the first to hear, like and subscribe and the bell and we'll cheer. Some of you are patrons even though we are all the noobs and you're the pros. There's nothing we can do to thank you. No, really, there's nothing we could possibly do. Goodbye.